welcome to Always Upstream Zeitgeist. Please hit subscribe, hit that like button, and make sure that you select all notifications. I'd like to talk a little bit about tools today. This is a hammer. It's a pretty rudimentary device, essentially just to hit things. This is another hammer, basically the same. Functionally, they are identical. Not quite the same. See, the one's a little bit longer than the other. Similar sized heads, but different profiles of the pulling end. These two both have a throat that is slendered out to remove some of the weight. But let's think for a minute about the history of this piece. This is a modern hammer, but the idea of this hammer goes back to something far more primitive, essentially just a rock, probably a rock in someone's hand. The idea for this is I want to hit something and not have it hurt my hand. So hypothetically, I would imagine early on primitive humans hitting things, deciding it hurt their hand, grabbing a rock. Maybe 5 or 6 different people were all hitting stuff with rocks, and they realized the person with the longest arm actually did the most damage to whatever they were hitting. Even if somebody stronger with more muscle mass was hitting it, the person with the longer arm seemed to do the most damage. So that rock was attached to a handle. And then that rock got more customized, and at some point that rock became metal. And then at some point the entire handle became metal. But in the process of that, everything about this became very customized to different tasks. But they all followed the same principle. The idea of force directed. And that's really the idea of what a hammer is. While this physical artifact is a hammer, the hammer existed before this physical artifact, or this physical artifact, or the one before that, or the one before that. The idea of the hammer goes back to the idea of hammering, hitting something. In a way, the object itself is a physical manifestation of an idea. All tools are the physical manifestation of an idea. A hammer is the idea of hitting something. Drill is the idea of putting a puncture into something. This is a really obvious idea when you think of physical tools, but it's much more open than that. So let's take this hammer and apply a different idea to it. Let's turn this hammer into a key and open up a door and see what we find. So this is a framing hammer that my grandfather used to build his house back when people did things like that themselves. The idea of putting things together to assemble a larger piece goes back a very long way. And tools were central in developing an understanding, an idea of how to make that happen. But every tool has an intended purpose. And let's call that intended purpose its function. Every tool, based on its function, can become a weapon by inverting that function. So this is a device that has two ends. Well, it has an end for compression and an end for tension. So if you wanted to pull out a nail, you'd use this. If you take this tool with its design intent, so to hit something, that's the design functionality, the design intent. To weaponize it, you in effect maximize the effect by accepting that the effect will not be the intended effect. So any tool becomes a weapon when you take the intended effect and invert it. So with this tool, if you want, the design intent is hitting it with the flat end to drive something into another thing or separate two things or what have you. That's the design effect. For maximum effect, you'd actually invert it and you'd hit with these two smaller points, which would concentrate all the force into these little tiny things. So if I wanted to hit this and just maximize the effect of my swing with no regard to what happens, just simply as an exercise in maximizing the effect of this device, you'd invert it. If you think about that with maybe a wrench, it's a different tool, crescent wrench. The intention here is actually rotation. Bolt head. That's the design effect, is rotation. Maximum effect would be to, rather than rotating that way, would be to rotate at someone or something. Maximum effect from this thing. So the design effect is constructive, useful. Maximum effect is destructive. Construction versus destruction. Tool versus weapon. Screwdriver, again, small rotations. But if you wanted to maximize this, it's actually stabbing. Find the design effect and invert that to establish maximum effect. Now, that's a very simple and obvious set of things for physical tools. But the same premises exist within non-physical tools. And believe it or not, almost everything that exists is a tool. Just about everything that exists is a tool. Almost everything that exists was made for some reason. There is a goal, a reason for that. The function of a house is to provide shelter. The function of a car is to provide mobility. The function of a system can also be inverted. So the justice system is a tool. The design intent, the design effect of justice is to provide legal protections to everybody and justice. It's in the name. But if you invert that, that's when you get maximum effect from that tool. That's when you weaponize that tool. So let's think about this. From a justice standpoint, the maximum effect that you can achieve from being a prosecutor is in deciding who you do and do not prosecute. So potentially withholding justice. This is a form of corruption, Prosecutor can't really accept a bribe to charge somebody for whom there are no charges to apply, but could accept a bribe to refuse to prosecute someone for whom there are obvious charges that should apply and should be applied. Every tool has a design effect and a maximum effect. And every maximum effect is achieved by subverting the intention of that tool. A bank is intended to hold money, protect money, make financial services available to the entire general public. That system is weaponized in refusing service to some people. This happened with redlining, with blacks in Chicago in particular, who were refused access to home loans that they could afford, but the bank had the power to refuse service. That's the maximum effect from being in that position. Every position's maximum effect is in weaponizing that position and essentially turning it from a tool into a weapon. Whatever an organization is intended to do, they will profit the most by doing the opposite. The founding fathers of the United States of America understood this, which is why they created the checks and balances system between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. Each of those branches has a role to play, and the central role of each of those is as a check on the other two. If the judiciary rules that a law is unconstitutional and the legislative branch refuses to acknowledge that and address it, then the system doesn't work and the system is weaponized. This is like throwing a monkey wrench into a set of gears. It's just going to break the machine. It's going to break the tool. It's going to weaponize the tool and turn that gearbox into a little bomb. Don't need to add explosives to make a complex tool explode. You simply need to interfere with the mechanism enough that the pressure internally forces the system to collapse. This is how the tools of a society are turned against that society. It does not happen by accident. It happens through intention. Not conspiracy, simply through selfish decision making by at least morally corrupt, if not literally corrupt individuals. Now, somebody can weaponize the position that they are in for personal reasons, or political reasons, or financial reasons, ideological reasons, religious reasons. But when you're in a position and you weaponize your position, there need to be checks and balances on that position. And I believe that we are going to be tested as a country and as a world. Will we hold institutions accountable for what they said they were going to do? Or will we allow people to claim that they did not know? Not knowing that you're breaking the law doesn't mean you're not breaking the law. Keep in mind this hammer as we go forward, and use this idea of inversion of design intent and apply that to things you see happening in the world. Are you seeing police officers refusing to enforce laws and instead enforcing dictates by various executives who have no capacity to make laws? That's weaponization. Are you seeing health agencies that are refusing to provide health services because politics mandate that they do? Are you seeing institutions that are supposed to fight for civil liberties that are instead arguing against civil liberties? That's weaponization. Be on the lookout. It is rampant, and it will likely be getting more and more intense as we continue to watch the collapse of modernism. Because postmodernists will define themselves as abiding by the rules, even when clearly in text they are not. Because to postmodernists, there is no truth. There's only what they say the truth is. When you hear somebody say, my truth, they don't care about truth. There is no my truth, your truth. There's my perspective, your perspective, and the truth. I'm not right about everything. You're not right about everything. Probably neither of us is wrong about everything either. Truth will determine what each of us is correct about. The truth is not determined by us. It's not determined on the floor of Congress. It's not, unfortunately, even determined in a court of law. We don't find people innocent in a court of law. We find people guilty or not guilty. Not guilty does not mean innocent. It just means they could not prove guilt. It's a very significant difference. An enormous difference. A difference that it is important that you understand. Because it is when we are operating under misconceptions of the function of a tool that that tool can be most readily weaponized against us. It's important to understand how tools work. Not just physical tools, not just electronic tools, not just data mining tools, not just electronic tools. Law enforcement is a tool. Attorneys are a tool. Accountants are a tool. Auditors are a tool. If you were guilty of tax evasion, your best course of action might be to try and bribe the auditor. And that would actually be the most profitable thing for that auditor to do. That's how that position gets turned to maximum effect. In times of great chaos, people look very quickly to maximum effect because they need to capitalize when they can, because they do not know what comes next. Chaos can be exceedingly profitable for those who are aware of what's happening. It's called the fog of war for a reason. Not knowing is often your greatest risk. So keep your eye out. Watch the tools swirling around your head. Make sure you understand how they work. Because in understanding how it works, you can understand how it will be weaponized against you. Without understanding that, you might never see it coming. So, on that note, please hit that like button, please hit subscribe, and select all notifications. Thanks, have a great day.